Hello everyone, my name is Richa Mahajan, Assistant Professor from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Jagannath University, Jaipur. Today I am going to talk about lighting contrast and its control by fill-in lights. Lighting contrast refers to the difference in brightness and darkness between different areas of a scene or subject in photography, cinematography, or stage lighting. It plays a crucial role in creating visual interest, mood, and emphasis in an image or a performance. One way to control lighting contrast is by using fill lights. Fill lights are supplementary light sources used to reduce the contrast between the main light source and the areas. They are typically placed opposite the main light aimed at the subject or seen from a lower intensity and angle. The purpose of fill lights is to fill in the shadows created by the main light, reducing the overall contrast. Here are a few key points to consider when using fill lights to control lighting contrast. Intensity and placement. Fill lights should be set at a lower intensity compared to the main light source. This helps to avoid overpowering the shadows and creating a flat, evenly lit look. Placing the fill light on the opposite side of the main light helps to minimize shadows while still providing some depth and dimension to the scene. Light modifiers modify the fill light to achieve the desired effect. Softening the fill light by using diffusers or bouncing it off reflectors can help create a more subtle fill and smoother transition between the main light and the shadows. Light modifiers like soft boxes, umbrellas or reflectors can be used to control the direction and quality of the fill light. Next is balance and ratios. The balance between the main light and the fill light is crucial. You can adjust the ratio of the light, you can adjust the ratio of the main light to the fill light to control the overall contrast. A higher a higher ratio of main light to fill light will result in a higher contrast, while a lower ratio will yield a more even and balanced lighting. Subject and style. Consider the subject and the intended style or the mood of the scene. Different subjects and artistic goals may require varying levels of contrast. For example, a dramatic portrait may benefit from higher contrast, while a well-lit product shot may require more even lighting. Remember, the use of fill lights is just one technique among many for controlling lighting contrast. Experimentation ex- and experience may will Experimentation and experience will help you develop your own style and understanding of how to use fill lights effectively in different scenarios. Today, my topic is direction and angle of light: front, side, top, and back. First is frontal lighting, that is front light. Frontal lighting is lighting that emanates either from behind the camera or from the camera itself. Built in or on camera flash is a frontal light. Frontal lighting has one big advantage. It evenly illuminates your subject, so metering is fairly straightforward. However, it tends to flatten a subject. The shadows cast by frontal light are behind the subject, out of sight from the camera's point of view. Shadows help to give a sense of shape and form to a subject. Without shadows, a subject's shape becomes more ambiguous. Shadows can also add drama to a photo. Frontal light lacks drama, making a photo look more like a record shot and be less interesting for the reader. Side lighting. Side lighting is light that falls on a subject at roughly 90 degrees to the camera. This means that one side of a subject will be lit and other side will be in shadow. In terms of helping to convey a subject's shape and form, this is ideal. One of three directions side lighting creates the strongest sense that a subject has three dimensions. There is always a catch, however. The catch in this instance is contrast. Side lighting does not evenly illuminate your subject. Early morning or late afternoon light ranking across the landscape is perfect for emphasizing textures. One side will be more strongly illuminated than the other. The contrast will be greater the harder the light is, but the principle holds true even for softer light. One solution is to use a reflector or supplementary light to gently illuminate the shadows side. The key is to lighten the shadows without overpowering them. Next is backlighting. Backlighting is caused when the light source is behind the subject, shining towards the camera. If your subject obscures the light sources and if you expose for the background rather your subject, the result will be in silhouette. Strong backlighting usually results in a silhouette. However, it's less so when your subject's shape is more ambiguous. If you do not want to create a silhouette, when you will need to also illuminate your subject. Flash is one of the easiest way to do this, a technique known as fill-in flash. The strength of the flash will determine the balance between the exposure for the background and your subject. Less is often more. Too much flash and you run the risk of losing the sense that there is any backlighting at all. Next is lighting equipments. When you first dive into photography, lighting equipment, you are bound to feel massively overwhelmed. Studio lighting seems complex. It's full of confusing jargons and it certainly is not designed for the beginner. But here is the truth. While photography lighting might seem complicated, it's actually pretty easy to get started assuming you have the right teacher. That's where this article comes in handy. I aim to share all the photoshoot lighting basics so that by the time you are done, you will have a strong understanding of both studio lighting equipments and accompanying vocabulary. Let's get started. So, first is types of light. In this section, I cover the main types of studio light. Note that each lighting types varies in terms of usefulness, portability, cost, and more. Number one is strobes. You can see the image of the strobe lighting. This is a flashlight. A studio strobe, sometimes referred to as a monoblock or monolight, is a dedicated flash unit. Stops generally use codes, though more battery powered offerings are brought to the market every day. Power output between models can vary greatly. Cheaper stops offer about as much power as cheap. Third party flash guns, while class leading stops, are some of the strongest lights in the business. For this reason, stops are the most common studio lights used by the professionals. Next is continuous light. Continuous lights serve the same function as stop, but they do not flash. Instead, they are high powered constant lamps that can usually be filtered with modifiers. While associated with video, continuous lights still have their place in still photography. LED lights are currently flooding the continuous light market, and many of them are viable option for still shooters. Note that Note that continuous lights are sometimes referred to as hot lights because they tend to get very hot. Be careful with modifiers that sit close to the bulb as they present a fire hazard. This does not apply to LED lights. Next is flash gun. Flash guns are small lights that mount on top of your camera. You can see the picture of the flash gun light. They are highly portable and some come with reasonably high power outputs. Although flash gun versatility is ultimately limited by size and power output, they are still an extremely useful tool for any photographer instead in off-camera lighting. They are also less expensive than dedicated studio strops. Next is light functions. In this section, I discuss lighting roles. In other words, what do different studio lights actually do? How many studio lights do you need? And where do you point them? Key light. Number one is key light. The key light is a main light. You use it to create the overall lighting effect. Generally, the key light is the brightest and the most prominent light in your scene. Next is fill light. A fill light is positioned in reaction to the key light. It reduces the intensity of shadows created by the key light, thereby decreasing the overall contrast in your scene. Third is rim light, backlight. Rim light illuminates your subject from behind, generally with the goal of separating the subject from the background. Often, rim lights are positioned so that only a sliver of light is visible on the sides of your subject. Background light. Background lights point away from the subject to light the background. Not all studio lighting includes background lights, but like rim light, it's a nice way to create subject background separation. Hair light. Hair lights are used in portrait photography to add emphasis to your subject's hair. They can also be used to help bring up the exposure of your subject's head if it is blending into the background. Ambient light. Ambient light refers to any light present before the addition of your studio lighting. It comes from lights in the room, daylight from a window, cracks above the door, etc. Modifiers. Modifiers go between the light source and your subject with the goal of changing the quality or intensity of the light. A modifier might harden the light, it might soften the light, and it might reduce the light, or it might create unique lighting patterns. Next is umbrellas. Umbrellas look like umbrellas, except they are not designed for rainy day use. Instead, photography umbrellas come in silver or white and are attached to your light via a mount. By pointing a studio light into the umbrella, which reflects the light back to your subject as displayed in the photo below, you create a much larger, softer light source. Umbrellas are technically directional, but they can have a lot of spill, and they certainly are not the easiest modifier to control. Umbrellas are your most basic modifier. They are good for soft, diffused lights, but they are hard to control. Yes, they are very hard to control. Next is translucent umbrellas, shoot through umbrellas. Translucent umbrellas do not reflect light like the umbrellas discussed above. Instead, they are made of diffusion materials that softens the light. Simply point your light into a translucent umbrella to get a beautiful, even result, though with practically zero directionality. Next is soft boxes. Soft boxes come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Once you mounted a softbox shapes and soften the light to become more flattering, soft boxes also tend to be quite directional. They are easy to control and they can even be adjusted with additional modifiers such as grids. Soft boxes are highly versatile, so they are an ultra popular studio accessories. Soft boxes are the workhorse of the photographic studio and they come in all shapes and sizes. Next is strip boxes. Strip boxes are a special type of long rectangular softbox. They produce a narrow beam of light which is great for lighting subjects from behind for a rim lit effect. You can see the photograph of strip boxes. It's a very directional light. Next is octa boxes. Octa boxes are special octagonal softboxes. Octaboxes are special octagonal softboxes. The round result is useful for shaping portrait lighting. Octaboxes tend to be quite large, creating specially soft, flickering light that's perfect for portrait photography. Next is reflectors. Not to be confused with handheld reflectors discussed below. Reflective modifiers mount directly to a studio strop. They channel the light in a specific angle for very directional light. Reflector reflect, Reflector light is very hard, and most reflectors are designed to take a variety of grids. Next is snoots. Snoots are the modifiers designed to focus your light in a very narrow beam. They make great hair and background lights. You can see the photographs of snoots. Barn doors. Barn doors are fitted with two or four flaps. These allow you to block and shape the light to create different effects. For instance, barn doors flaps can help you to focus your light on a specific aspect of your subject, such as the hair, or they can be used to prevent flag the light from hitting a certain spot. Beauty dishes. Beauty dishes are directional modifiers that sit somewhere between soft and hard light. They are great for photography, fashion photography, and portraiture. They often come with grids and diffusion socks to give you extra option. Next is grids and honeycombs. Grids are modifiers for your modifiers. You place them on a reflector, softbox, or beauty dish to further narrow the beam of light. To ensure the light is only falling on your subject or on some other desired location. Next is gobo. A gobo goes in front of a light source and changes the shape of the light. A gobo might simply narrow the beam or it might complex patterns. Confused image. Imagine a Ventian blind. Imagine a Ventian blind with light streaming through. Now imagine the pattern on the wall. The blind is acting as an effective gobo and shaping the light. Color gels. Gels are colorful, translucent sheet that fit over your light. Thanks to gels, your lights can produce just about any color imaginable for all sorts of creative effects. CTO gels. These are color correction gels when used when you need to correct the color temperature of a given light. For example, if you have a gridded beauty dish that is on the warmer side and you want to use a second cooler light as a hair light, you would place a CTO gel over your hair light. That way, you can match and balance the color output of both lights. Portable reflectors. Not to be confused with reflective modifiers above. Reflectors allow you to reflect light back onto your subject. They are way to create fill light without a second dedicated light source. Here I forgot to mention what are CTO gels. What is the full form of CTO? That is color temperature orange. If it is CTB, that is color temperature blue. But here we are using CTO gels. It means this is color temperature orange gels. Okay, moving on to next. Next is flags. Flags are used to block or flag light from falling on certain parts of the scene. You can use a flag to stop excess light falling on your background, or you can use a flag to reduce this exposure on specific parts of your subject. For example, I sometimes use flags to underexpose everything from the neck down in the close portraits. This helps ensures that the face is the main focus of the image. Next is 1, 2 and 3 point lighting, key fill and backlighting. We have already discussed about these lights. Here is a short crux of these lights, that is key light, fill light and backlight. 3 point lighting is a traditional method for illuminating a subject in a scene with light sources from three distinct positions. The three types of lights are key light, fill light and backlight. Number 1 is key light. This is primary and the brightest light source in the 3 point lighting setup. It gives a scene its overall exposure. It gives a scene its overall exposure. Cinematographers typically position this main light slightly off to the side of the camera and the front of the subject on a light stand and a 45-degree angle to the camera, which creates shadows on the opposite side of the subject's face. Giving it dimension and depth, the primary light creates the mood of a scene. Depending upon its position and supplement light used in the overall lighting, it can create a high-key image, evenly, softly lit, and atmospherically upbeat, or a low-key image, high contrast, deep shadows, and very moody. Very moody. Fill light. Mirroring the key light on the opposite side of the camera, the fill light literally fills in the shadows that the key light creates on a subject, bringing out details in the darkness. Typically, this secondary light is less bright than the key, and the cinematographers control the overall feel of their shots based on how much they dim or lighten the fill light. A dim fill light where the fill ratio is high, where the fill ratio is high, creates a high contrast film noir types of shadow, while a brighter light with a lower, more balanced ratio gives the subject a more even look. The second light is not always a light. It can be a reflector, a bounce card, a wall, or anything that bounces back some light onto the subject to fill in the shadows. Together with the key light, the fill light determines the mood of a scene. Backlight. Next is backlight. The third source in this lighting technique, the backlight, also known as the rim light or hair light, shines on a subject from behind, completing the light setup. This creates a rim of light or outline around their head that pushes the subject away from the background and gives a sense of depth. Typically, cinematographers position the backlight directly behind the subject or high enough to be out of frame, opposite the key light, and at the back and pointing at the back of the subject's neck. Next is, how is three-pointing lighting used? There is no set formula for how three-point lighting is used. This often depends on the scene, the subject matter, and the overall mood that a cinematographer or photographer wants to evoke. Good lighting creates a more interesting and dynamic images where the subject is seen with more dimension and where the cinematographer has more control over shadows. The lighting setup helps bring dimension to characters. Three-point lighting also helps shape a subject to bring out the best or worst of them. By placing a soft key lighting, by placing a soft light slightly off center with a 2.1 fill ratio, a cinematographer creates a soft, flattering look that also tends to hide blemishes in the skin when your subjects are people. This soft lighting is called high key lighting and creates an optimistic, upbeat, youthful, light, and airy mood that is common in sitcoms and comedies. In a cinematographer, if a cinematographer opts for a higher fill ratio like 8 ratio 1, the key light casts sharp edges shadow that contrast sharply with the lights. This is low key lighting, which creates a dramatic, mysterious, unsettling, and alienating mood and can display a range of deep negative emotions. As such, it is common in dark dramas, thrillers, horrors, and film noir. What is four-pointing lighting? Four-point lighting utilizes an additional background light. to illuminate what is behind the subject. Unlike the light, unlike the backlight, which creates a ring or an outline of the subject, the background light illuminates background elements such as wall or outdoor scenery. Cinematographers use this technique to eliminate shadows cast by foreground elements onto the background or to draw attention to the background. The fourth light also helps the camera give depth to the subject. To achieve the look, the cinematographer positions a background light behind the subjects, either low to the ground or on a high grid facing towards background elements, such as walls or outdoor scenery. Thank you so much.